The Lido in Paris is aflame with celebrities on the Champs-Élysées for the opening of a new and zesty show. Everybody who is anybody is there. The Duke of Windsor heads the notables, which include Michelle Morgan and the famous mustache of Salvador Dali and veteran Maurice Chevalier. The show itself scores an instant hit for the festive season, as well as the dancing which follows. Author Francois Seguin sets the pace for an occasion that is truly Parisian, truly festive, and in every sense, a success.
Science and technology policy, lacking that female diversity, not asking for a handout, just thinking about how to fix the drought. Your own science proves it, hon, we bring the heat. Inclusion makes a brighter sector for us all, for our benefit. Let's bring the lights out and shine. Come on, equality begins with you and me. We're making new history, equally, all in one sector. Look at what we can be. Shh.
Oh, that's better. Science and technology policy. What is it? Why is it important? How having a more inclusive science and technology policy sector with an emphasis on more women would benefit us all. While I'm enjoying my time in the lab, I think I'll pass the microscope to someone who can help me better answer these three questions. What is science and technology policy? Well, that's a good question to ponder on your next lunch break to the cafeteria. Just like every good meal, your body needs different groups working together to get the nutrition you need. Science and technology policy works exactly the same way.
You need different scoops of different sectors, the STEM areas and policy making to come together to create the ideal meal of policies based on science and data that is right for your country to survive and thrive.
So, in other words, science and technology policy is where the STEM sector meets legislation. Exactly.
Of course, what one person needs might not be the same as what another person needs nutritionally.
Each person needs different meal plans with different food groups coming together to comprise of what's best for their own individual body. Think of that as domestic science and technology policy. Each country has specific policies that cater best to their individual needs. However, we all need to be aware and supportive of each person's nutritional needs because we all have one main thing in common. We all need to eat, just like each country has the same basic needs, and sometimes we need to work together to make sure everyone gets what they need to eat if there is ever an issue. Think of that as global science and technology policy. Different science and technology policy sectors from different countries working together on a consensus for the greater good of everyone. This especially comes in handy in case of emergencies, such as, say, a food poisoning, because it affects everyone's nutrition plans.
So, would working together to fight the coronavirus be a good example of global science and technology policy? Exactly.
Think of the coronavirus as the food poisoning. It affects everyone personally. That's your domestic science and technology policy for each country. And we all have a common problem that we are facing together because we are eating from the same cafeteria. That would be coming together for global science and technology policy.
Can you think of another good analogy that explains how the STEM community works with lawmakers to create a science and technology policy? Absolutely. Think of the nutritionists as the STEM community, and you are the legislation, the policymakers.
The STEM community tells you what to eat in order to have all of the nutrition your body needs based on the science and data at hand. Now your body is the legislation part, where you now take the food that the STEM community recommended and eat it. Your body then decides where to allocate the energy to where you need it most. Of course, if you weren't given the proper recommendations, then your body wouldn't be getting the food it needs to properly operate.
That, by a lunch lady's comparison, is how science and technology policy operates. I'm hungry.
So, to turn that back to the coronavirus example, the STEM community meets with policymakers and gives them the information they need to pass any laws or policies that they deem are necessary with the information given to them based on science and data, such as recommendations on what PPE to wear, how to proceed with vaccination rollout, and when to shelter in place. This is a prime example of when science and technology policy is needed at both local and global levels in order to function properly for the safety of all as the goal. It's important to understand that there is no one group or individual that represents the STEM community, and no one group or person that represents the policymakers in any domestic science and technology policy sector. But many countries hold offices of science and technology policy in their branches of government to help filter the most relevant science and data for policymakers to evaluate.
The essence of science and technology policy is when STEM meets legislation. Science and technology policy. Why is it important? Why should you care about science and technology policy? Because these policies can affect you directly in the community as well as individually, not just in the broader global sense.
Going back to the coronavirus example, when you are eligible for the vaccine, it affects you directly, as well as the whole community, and then, essentially, the world, once everyone in your country has been vaccinated as a global standing.
Science and technology policy can help us identify and fix some of the largest issues we are facing today, both domestically and globally. It's a really important sector that not a lot of people think or know about.
People know that we need science and technology, as well as legislation, but rarely know what specifically brings them together, how it works domestically and internationally, and which issues this sector can cover. It's kind of like food. We don't necessarily always think about the food we put into our bodies or how it gets to our plate, but we know we need it.
We also need to nourish our minds just as much as we nourish our bodies, which is why I'm here as your science and technology policy lady to serve you up the scoops of knowledge you need to understand one of the most important sectors of our time. Together we can break down the issues and understand the importance of this sector and also the challenges this sector is facing, both domestically and globally. One of the biggest challenges this sector is currently facing is underrepresentation of women. While lunch lady is quite a common term, unfortunately, science and technology policy lady is not.
Now let's talk about how having a more inclusive science and technology policy sector would benefit us all. Science and technology policy is comprised of two sectors: the STEM sector, and policymaking. Seeing as science and technology policy is not comprised of one single person, institution, branch of government, or organization in either the STEM sector or policymaking domestically or internationally, looking at statistics separately for both sectors helps us gauge a more accurate percentage of women in science and technology policy. Regarding policymaking, women make up only 25% of all national parliamentarians, and women serve as heads of state or government in only 22 countries, and 119 countries have never had a woman leader. At the current rate, gender equality in the highest positions of power will not be reached for another 130 years. According to the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization's groundbreaking report, Cracking the Code, Girls and Women's Education in STEM, only 35% of STEM students in higher education globally are women, and differences are observed within STEM disciplines. For instance, only 3% of female students in higher education choose information and communication technologies. This gender disparity is alarming, especially as STEM careers are often referred to as the jobs of the future, driving innovation, social well-being, inclusive growth, and sustainable development. What's more alarming is that number continues to drop to 30% when looking at the percentage of women researchers globally after losing researchers during their educational careers to the leaky pipeline. Those numbers are significantly less when considering women who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. How is lack of diversity affecting science and technology policy? Why is diversity so important? Diversity is critical to excellence. In Western cultures, we often remember the stereotype of the brilliant scientist who makes substantial contributions through their innate genius, like Albert Einstein. However, scientific talent is not innate. It is cultivated through many hours of training and effort. Also, scientific teams, not individuals, conduct most scientific research. When we consider scientific research as group problem solving instead of the unveiling of individual brilliance, diversity becomes key to excellence. In his book, The Difference, Professor Scott Page lays out a mathematical rationale and logic for diversity. He shows that when trying to solve complex problems, the sort of thing scientists are paid to do, progress often results from diverse perspectives. That is, the ability to see the problem differently, not simply being smart, often is the key to a breakthrough. As a result, when groups of intelligent individuals are working to solve hard problems, the diversity of the problem solvers matters more than their individual ability. Thus, diversity is not distinct from enhancing overall quality. It is integral to achieving it. Additionally, diversity is not just helping science. It's good for business too. The report, Delivering Through Diversity, reaffirms the positive link between a firm's financial performance and its diversity, which it defines in terms of the proportion of women and the ethnic and cultural composition of the leadership of large companies. Diversity is proving to be critical to excellence in many different sectors. Why is it crucial to not only have diversity, but to include more women in science and technology policy, as well as science in general? Well, for one, it means women might not get the quality of health care that men receive and could even be dangerous. It's now widely acknowledged that countless women with heart disease have been misdiagnosed in emergency rooms and sent home, possibly to die from heart attacks, because for decades what we know now wasn't known, that they can exhibit different symptoms from men for cardiovascular disease. Women also have suffered disproportionately more side effects from various medications, from statins to sleep aids, because the recommended doses were based on clinical trials that focused largely on average-sized men. Such miscalculated dosages often have not been discovered until the drugs were on the market. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration advised women to cut their doses of the sleeping pill Ambien in half after learning that the active ingredient in the drug remained in women's bodies longer than it did in men's. So was the oversight in medical research deliberate? No. Many scientists say it was not. However, there was simply a routine procedural bias not to include sex as a variable in scientific research. So, not only would having more women involved mean that the science itself would have been more accurate, but being more inclusive eliminates dangerous risks that might not have even occurred to scientists without having someone with a different voice. For generations, the model used in biomedical research to design drugs and products for everyone has been predicated on the physiology of an average-sized male, historically the standard reference figure in Gray's Anatomy, the medical textbook first published in the 1850s. Even the rats and other animals used in scientific experiments have mainly been male. For years, many researchers were concerned that hormone fluctuations in female animals would skew the results of tests, and simply assumed that males could be used to reliably predict effects in both men and women. As a result, sex, the biggest variable, has not been systematically evaluated and reported in the same way as variables like time, temperature, and dose, even in diseases that are female-dominated. A study by McGill University in Montreal revealed a lot about the role of gender in research, but from a different perspective. The study itself found that rats and mice being tested for pain response apparently were afraid of male researchers. It had something to do with how the men smelled. The rodents were so stressed by the male researchers, or even female researchers wearing shirts the men had slept in, that they became desensitized to pain, thus throwing off the test results and raising questions about previous studies in which lab animals were handled by male researchers. Without considering the variable of sex, science is failing to live up to its optimum potential. When considering science and technology policy, if no one on either the STEM side or legislative side of this sector is considering sex, the policies that could be produced based on this science could not only be beneficial for only some of the population, but could be dangerous to others.
Why has this happened? Why is there a lack of women in this sector?
The first thing to understand is that this is a systemic issue that is incredibly complex in nature and varies from country to country in specifics. But what all countries have in common is that the reason why ties back to two main issues: education and gender bias.
Unfortunately, there isn't enough time in this lunch hour for us to tackle these heavy portions, so we'll come back to these 2 hunks of meat next meal. Women should be respected in all roles in society, and we need to be aware of not just what we put into our bodies physically, but what we put into our bodies mentally. Well, as your science and technology policy lady, that's about all I have time for before I tackle cleanup duty. Facts for lunch from a real lady.
Science and technology policy, lacking in that female diversity, not asking for a handout, just thinking about how to fix the drought. Your own science proves it, hon. We bring the heat. Inclusion makes a brighter sector for us all, for our benefit. Let's bring the lights out and shine. Come on, equality begins with you and me.